Adrian Sandoval, Sam Villa ArTeam member here to show you how to cut the perfect graduated bob. So hands up, let's be honest, who has messed up the graduated bob in their career? I know I have, and luckily that haircut has long grown out. So I'm here to show you the common mistakes of elevation, over direction, and also when it comes down to the parting. So let's start with the proper sectioning of the graduated bob. What we tend to do is always have that side section go a little too far forward. As you can see, I have mine a little back. Right here is what I call the red zone. We need to start bringing our side section right where that hairline starts to become vertical. And this little space between the ears should not be graduated. This is where we tend to get all those holes. So the first spot I'm going to start at is in the nape. As you can see, my nape section is very fine and thin. I want to make sure that this is thin enough that those cowlicks start kind of jumping around and doing what it's going to do naturally. What we tend to do is take this first section down and really hold it tight with our hands, and what's going to happen, we're going to cut a blunt line, but then after that blunt line is cut and we let go, that cowlick's going to pop up. So please start making this section a little finer. Let's work with the cowlicks instead of working against them. So letting the hair fall into natural position, what I'm going to do is take our Streamline 5.5 shears. I'm going to use my middle finger of my non-cutting hand to balance, and I'm going to cut center to left and then center to right. I'm going to drop down a second section. I want that just as fine or even finer than the section I just cut. I am putting my subsections on a slight diagonal forward. I want that it's going to be slightly longer in the front. I like to do this because the back tends to grow out a little faster. The hair's a lot more dense back here. So if we do cut straight across, what tends to happen is when the hair starts growing out, it's going to look like the back is dropping down a little bit because all that weight is dropping it down and making it a little heavier and longer. So I like to keep this a little shorter than I do in the front, and then it's going to grow a little more natural and a little more straighter instead of having that back drop down. I'm going to be using my fine teeth just to comb that out. I still don't want any tension. I'm not going to be holding this with my hands. I'm going to be using my pointer finger of my non-dominant hand, starting in the center and just following that guide that I previously cut. I'm going to be taking my third to last section. Now it depends on how thick your sections are, but I like to still cut at 0 degree elevation, cutting straight across, when I get to right below that occipital bone. Right when I'm done with this third section, I'm going to start elevating and figuring out what angle we do want to graduate the haircut. Our mannequin Lydia here has no cowlicks. She has a great hairline, but if this was an actual client who has some cowlicks on the left, right side, sometimes even in the center, this is the best way to get a straight line instead of holding it down with tension and actually having that elevation of our fingers. This is going to be 0 elevation, and it's going to be a natural fall working with the cowlicks. Still just using the tips of my shears. If we start using our whole blade, we start pushing the hair a little too much. So whenever I'm doing this detail work, I only use the tips of my shears so the hair does not push. Now, depending on the length of what we just established for that cut line, depends on what angle we want. Now, if this was more of a lower lob, more shoulder length, we're gonna have a lot more lower tension. If it's medium length, kind of like where we're kind of at the shorter length, but if it's medium length, that's probably gonna be that natural 45 degrees. If we would cut right to that hairline, it's gonna be more of that shorter bob, then we can have a little higher elevation. But we do need to be careful because this is when we get into those Karen cuts, as what we all call them. So making sure that our mannequin is not a Karen cut and we're using that proper elevation. Having those fingers dip down a little bit lower is a little safer than having them too vertical. So sometimes it's better to start a little lower, and at least we'll have some wiggle room and adjust that elevation if we need to. Taking my first center section, I'm going to establish my first line of graduation. This might be a little higher graduation. What I'm going to do is just drop it down, have my fingers a little lower, and all I'm going to be doing is just removing that tip. The hair at the bottom is our solid form, first already cut guideline, so we don't want to cut into that. So what I'm going to be doing is taking that ½ inch off right at that top of that tip of my center section. Using my fine teeth, I am not over directing, pulling everything straight out, and I'm just going to remove just that top portion. Now I'm on my second section. It's going to be that slightly diagonal forward. Taking that diagonal forward. And what I'm going to be doing is over directing it to that previous section. As you can see, I just have that little bit in that middle to cut and match up. Now I'm on my corners. I'm going to be holding this almost like solid form 0 elevation, but what I'm going to do is just over direct it back just slightly and just see that hair removing just in that center part. And what this is going to do is keep those corners nice and strong. We never want to cut into the corners. We never want to round those off, cut them off, and that's where we start getting that hole right in the behind that ear. So let's avoid that today. Now I'm using the wide teeth part. I always call this our 11th finger. These Sam Villa combs are great. Best combs on the market. So while I'm cutting this haircut, I am sitting down on a stool. For anybody who is not sitting down on stools while they're cutting solid form, bobs, especially when you get that fatigue, standing all day long at the salon, please start using stools. It's all about longevity and being smart. Taking my center section, I want to comb all the way to the bottom of that previous section. I'm going to angle my fingers out. So remember, when we start working our way upward, we want to make sure that those fingers slowly start getting out and going longer. Sometimes we start having our fingers go a little vertical and then that stacking gets a little too high and then you got welcome Karen. So let's make sure we do not do that and have our fingers follow that line and have them start going further and further out as we work our way up above the head. I'm going to be combing out, following that guide, removing that length. Taking a diagonal forward. You can see my part line right there. I'm on my diagonal forward. And what I'm going to be doing is over directing this back to the previous section and cutting to the previous guide. Last section, I almost hold like a solid form elevation, if you will. And all I'm going to be doing is just slightly over directing this back. I can see my guide right there at my fingertip and working my way down. By holding that last section in this subsection, this is going to make sure that those corners stay nice and strong and we're not going to be removing any weight. Let's scoop up, check this horizontally, comb up to the section that I just cut, pull that out, see if there's any loose hair that I missed. Now my fingertips are down on the right side. And remember, this should always be longer right at this point and everything should be getting shorter. So you should start seeing some stacking forming. You don't want to see too much. You can see I got my weight line nice and low and there's going to be a little stacking underneath. And when we do look at graduation, the highest point of the graduation should be in the center and it should be a little wider here and it should go down to almost nothing till it's solid form right at these corners. My fingers should get a little further and further away from the head as I'm working my way up because that graduation should get longer and longer. Looking for that guide right at the bottom, as you can see. Making sure my fingers are a little further out and cutting right to that guide. That was my first vertical center section. Now what I'm going to be doing is a slight diagonal forward. I'm going to over direct all to that center section. I like to get a thick guide from their previously cut hair because it's a nice strong line to follow. Grabbing a good chunk of previously cut hair so I can have a very clean guide of what I need to cut. Moving the hair. Nice and flat. Over direct it slightly back. I can see my guide right there. And I'm making sure that there is no graduation by the time I hit that right side of that corner. So not only did my sectioning change when I got above that ear, where that back and side section became one big section and I did a diagonal forward, my subsections are going to change. So what I'm going to do is comb down, slightly over directing, following that guide from those previous sections and working my way down. By the time I hit that behind that ear, there should be 0 elevation, matching it, and just still following that angle. A little shorter at the top, getting a little longer once I hit the bottom. And this is that red zone area I was saying. That's why it's really important to make sure those side sections are a little further back when we first start parting off for this haircut, because this section right here should not be graduated. This is where we get the holes. Once we graduate it, we're going to cut all that weight off and it's going to start lifting up on us, and then you got a nice hole right behind that ear. So to avoid that, let's part that off for the side section. Once we get to the sides, we're going to bring that down, cut it to 0 elevation, and you got no hole. So I'm going to be pulling this back slightly over direction with 0 elevation, following that guide from the previous back section and making sure that those corners are slightly getting a little bit longer. Let's bring in the sides. Remember that ear area is also where we tend to put a little holes in there. So let's loosen that tension up just a little bit at that ear. Working my way forward. The line should be getting longer. Over directing. Matching up to that weight line. Working my way down. So when it comes to the blow drying of all my haircuts, what I like to do is I like to blow dry the way I cut it. So if I start in the back with subsections diagonal forward, I'm going to create that same sectioning when I'm blow drying. And I'm going to also take my round brush and slightly over direct it to get that bevel that I want. If we do not get this section smooth and beveled how we want it, it's just going to be a snowball effect and it's not going to have that nice beveled, graduated look that we're looking for. So making sure that we're taking our time with this first subsection, a small round brush, and making sure that we get that bevel that we want, and everything else is going to cooperate as we work our way up from the head. Small round brush. I do not want to get any volume at that root. What I'm doing is just kind of spinning that round brush and making sure I'm getting that bevel and the hair nice and flat. And all I'm doing is really focusing on beveling those ends down and having them lay nice and flat. I am not lifting this section up and trying to get too much volume at the root. I want that root to sit at natural fall, but I want those ends to be slightly beveled in. I am getting to the back and sides now. I am above the ear, so now I switch to the next size round brush of our Sam Villa thermal round brushes. When I get to this part, you don't want to get too much volume, but a little volume's okay because now we're starting to hit that crown area. I can stop here, maybe do some texturizing, but some people feel like that bevel look kind of gives that outdated look and it looks like you're about to drop your kids to soccer games. So staying away from that, since we did such a really good job round brushing, what I'm going to do is now take our Sam Villa flat iron at our medium color treated 392 degrees and go through the hair quickly, and just to get that slight bevel look, just so she looks a little less carroty. Got my flat iron set to medium 392 yellow color treated. I got my Sam Villa heat resistant comb, and all I'm going to do is stay away from that root area. I'm just going to hit those ends and just make sure that they're as smooth as they can be. Holding that with my fine teeth, just going from the medium or the middle of strand all the way to those ends and slightly beveling in. Taking my teeth upward, fine teeth, following it with that flat iron, and just kind of going back and forth with my comb and flat iron, making sure I get that bevel that I want. It's gonna give that less soccer mommy look and maybe more hockey mom. Now your dry cutting detail work is what's gonna separate you from other stylists at the salon. And the graduated bob always has to have some detail. Either we're gonna trim up that nape and clean that up, or there's also some blending of some weight lines that we need to kind of break up with the graduation. So right now what I'm doing is detailing the original cut guideline, making sure that nape does not dip down in any direction, that it's nice and straight across, nice and even and balanced. So now I'm going to switch to our Sam Villa Invisiblends. These are great for blending in any weight extensions, and they're not going to leave any lines while you cut. I'm going to be taking that wide teeth part of my comb, lifting up each layer, cutting, scooping up. Don't want to keep cutting in the same spot. Lifting that hair up. I'm breaking the weight up and layering at the same time. Taking vertical sections, see if I need to remove any weight. It usually sits and lives right at the top. Grabbing the next section right behind that ear. Breaking up any weight. So that was my classic graduated bob tutorial. Thank you for watching. I hope this helped. I'm Adrian Sandoval, Sam Villa ArTeam member.